Welcome to the Black Post with Jordan Swaysland and Matthias. We're going to start off today by talking about Pete Buttigieg in the 2019-2020 Democratic presidential race. Currently, Pete Buttigieg is being propped up by mainstream media as a serious contender. And in our recent New Hampshire poll, where he finished fourth place, CNN made sure to talk about how it was a strong fourth place at 10%. And the issue with his candidacy is he's polling at literal 0% with black voters. And of course, you can't win a Democratic primary. You can't even hope to challenge for the nomination in a Democratic primary without significant support from the black community. And polling at 0%, the first thing CNN decides to say is that, well, maybe it's happening because of, quote, homophobia in the black race. And, it's just to paint black people as uniquely homophobic for a candidate who is not even polling at 10% nationally is pretty hilarious, because what does that say then for other groups in the Democratic primary that are not supporting people to judge the race?
It's basically saying that the entire Democratic Party is homophobic because you don't have women, you don't have Latinos, you don't have black people. So who do you have other than maybe some corporations, which...
I mean, he's getting more donations from billionaires and super PAC money than anybody in this race so far. And that's not to say he doesn't have any grassroots support, because obviously if you start doing well in Iowa, which is a caucus state, you do have some level of grassroots enthusiasm. But I think that if the plan for the Democratic Party to avoid a Warren or a Sanders nomination is for Pete Buttigieg to do well, and he does well in Iowa and New Hampshire, which are two of the whitest states in the country, that still does not get to the issue at hand, that he's at 0% with black voters. And the reason why is not because black voters are homophobic. It's not because, any other contrived conspiracy against Pete Buttigieg. It's the simple fact that within his city, he allegedly fired the chief of police and originally demoted him. Then the chief of police fought against that, and he ended up getting fired. And he allegedly did that because advisors were pushing for him to do that. Now, this chief of police is the first black chief of police in South Bend, Indiana history. And this is a city with 102,000 people, very low voter turnout when he won his mayoral race. And every single time that he ran for mayor, less and less black people turned out to support him. So to me, that tells me that in such a small city, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows the local politics, what's going on, And for your black support to continuously erode in such a small city, and for you to have hope that somehow it rebounds, or, you can't even say double because it's at 0%, but that it starts to increase just a little bit is just comical to me.
The fact is he doesn't have any support from the black community because he's not doing anything or proposed anything for the black community. There's nothing on the edge of Medicare or anything like that for all that's going to significantly help the black community. His platform is just another corporate Democrat, center-right, middle lane. Like, let's just take
the Medicare for all who want it, which is pretty much a public option, is the biggest wet kiss you can possibly give to the health insurance and pharmaceutical industry. Yeah. Like, it's pretty much saying that, yes, we're for getting as many people as we possibly can covered, at least what they consider to be possibly, and as far as coverage goes. But what it does is it still leaves a significant amount of people underinsured. It still leaves an even larger amount of people uninsured. And it doesn't address the problems that over 500,000 people a year are declaring bankruptcy for medical costs. They can't afford their hospital bills. You have hospitals literally suing people now. There's people who can't afford their insulin. There's people who can't afford their cancer medication. And when you're sitting there and you're offering, and so many of those issues affect the black community at disproportionate rates. And so when you have a candidate who offers nothing, who literally tells black protesters at his little rallies that he has in his town that you won't get our support, and he tells them, I'm not asking for your vote. When you add all these things in together, it's no wonder why black people are saying, no, we're good. Like,
how can you say you're not asking for your base's vote. That's your base. The minority vote, the woman vote, that is the Democratic base. Yep. How can you not ask your base for the vote? Like,
it's arrogance. It's arrogance. I mean, a few weeks ago, he said that the race is coming down to him and Elizabeth Warren.
He's not even.
What are you talking about? You're in fourth place, and nationally, you're battling. Sometimes you're being outperformed by an entrepreneur like Andrew Yang, who doesn't have any political experience whatsoever, but yet and still is outperforming you. It's still raising $10 million from grassroots movement. You're not anywhere near the top 3 contenders. Like, they're tripling you in some polls as far as support goes. So, to have his campaign compared to the 2008 Barack Obama's presidential campaign, which was one of the most effective and well-run campaigns in the history of American politics, to compare it to that simply because he's starting to excite supporters in 2 of the whitest states and ignore the issues that he has is very hypocritical, because the entire narrative in 2015 and 2016 on why Bernie Sanders couldn't possibly get the nomination is because he was lacking in Black support. So now, and people always talk about how Sanders supporters are always, crying about media coverage and how unfair it is. But this is a perfect example of that. You have, in one instance, somebody who's seriously challenging Hillary Clinton, the most groomed candidate of all time.
Checks off every box on paper.
Every box. You have the reason he can't possibly topple her is because he doesn't have the Black support as far as Bernie Sanders is concerned. But now we fast forwarded, and because Bernie and Warren are doing so well, and Biden continuously slips, now you have to prop up a new one to take his place, a new neoliberal to take his place. And now we're not talking about the Black support anymore. And if we are talking about it, it's the negative connotation that the reason why they're not doing this is because they're homophobic or they're this, they're that. And to me, it speaks to the lack of awareness from mainstream media to break out of that beltway bubble that they're stuck in. And what happens a lot with these politicians is that they're so caught up into these dinner parties with each other and with wealthy campaign contributors that they hear what each other say to them, and they take that and this has to be the narrative then in America. So if me and you are at a dinner party and, I'm a host on MSNBC or CNN and you're a wealthy campaign contributor and you say, man, I really like that Pete Buttigieg. Oh, America's starting to fall in love with Pete Buttigieg. It's time to run that story. And it's not that, that doesn't make the mainstream media dishonest. It's just that it doesn't make them, fake news like Donald Trump likes to call them. It makes them dishonest, and it shows that they omit the truth a lot when it comes to candidates who challenge that structure of power. And if you're going to have the Black support, you're going to have to challenge that structure of power. Because I think that in this election cycle specifically, Black voters more than ever are not settling for whatever you can give me.
It's not just Black voters. It's all minorities, and that includes women. And you look at Trump, well, he did better with women than Hillary did because Trump challenged the structure of power.
Exactly.
I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to clean this up. And he kind of made it seem like he was there for the common person.
Yeah.
Even though we all know he wasn't.
I mean, pathological liar.
Definitely. But you have to have something of sincerity, of authenticity that people can relate to. Bernie's been saying the same thing for 30, 40 years. Joe's went back and forth for 30, 40 years. Elizabeth Warren, not so much as Joe, but she once was.
Well, she used to be a Republican until her 40s.
So you don't suddenly wake up and realize that everything is wrong. You still have some of those traits. Like Pete's a media darling that has no authenticity and has nothing going for him other than them constantly saying he's a veteran or a war hero. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't work in the Democratic Party.
Especially when you have Tulsi Gabbard in the race as well.
Exactly. Like the last Democratic president that was a war veteran was JFK. Like that was it's 2019. That was almost 50 years ago.
Right.
They don't care about that. They care about what you have to say and what are you going to do for me.
Exactly.
It's just a media concoction of trying to get him to be liked, and he's just not liked.
Because even if he does, so in Iowa, the rules are that if your candidate that you're supporting in the caucus does not make 15% of that vote, then you're able to reassign your vote for another candidate. So what I'm worrying is that say Pete finishes third or second in Iowa, then the national media is going to explode even further. And if he places fourth or third in New Hampshire, he can't win Nevada and he can't win South Carolina because those are two constituencies that are just not interested in him as far as the Latino vote and as far as the black vote, respectively. So what I'm worried about is that they try to take this narrative that, he might not have won these states, but he did well in these states. See, guys, don't you like him? Can't we just push him on you? And you start creating this fracture again that's already there, but you start to create an even deeper fracture within the Democratic base that you can't really pull back together by the time the nomination process comes around.
It's the same tactics that they used with Bernie, but it's in reverse. Instead of Bernie doing well and you seeing it as an opportunity for him to actually win the Democratic nomination, it's flipping it for Pete like, he has a chance, there's hope. And it's not. Like, if you're polling like this late,
exactly,
you're not in the race.
Trump polls better with African Americans than Pete Buttigieg, so
and that says a lot. Trump said to black people, "What do you have to lose?" At least he said something to us. Like, but Pete said nothing at all. Like, there's not one thing. He doesn't want our vote. He's not asking for our vote. You're not asking for the base. That's the smartest thing I've ever heard. But I'm not a politician.
Little man Pete. I could just see Trump ragdolling him on the debate stage.
I could see Trump ragdolling everybody except Bernie.
You got that damn right. So Gordon Sondland, the ambassador to the EU for Donald Trump, has officially recanted his original testimony to Congress that there was no quid pro quo to now saying that there was indeed quid pro quo. And in typical Trump fashion, he went from praising the guy as an outstanding, American and patriot and all of this, to now he doesn't know him. He honestly doesn't know the guy. And but while he's saying that, he continuously says that he continuously uses his original testimony to say that there's no quid pro quo. But we now know that there was, in fact, quid pro quo. So the issues that Donald Trump is having, and this is in a reflection of the races that were taking place across the country on Tuesday, is that people are falling to the wayside as far as who we can trust to give an accurate testimony on what's going on. He's running out of people who are willing to fall on the sword for him. Right. His approval numbers continuously are in the toilet. 38% in the most recent poll. I mean, terrible. And you can point to the impeachment inquiry to the reason why. And furthermore, you can point to Gordon Sondland's new testimony as a reason why. This is an untrustworthy presidency. And when you listen to Donald Trump talk, he sounds like a guy who has everything closing in on him. He doesn't know what to do. And I'm telling you right now, it might be Mike Pence as the Republican nomination in 2020 with the way that this is going.
It may be. I don't think that Trump has the level of decorum to say that he's not going to accept his party's nomination or he's not going to look for re-election. He's going to go out in a blaze of glory that's going to be the most epic thing that anybody has ever seen. And it may ultimately destroy the Republican Party.
If he hasn't already.
If he hasn't already. Because what you're seeing, as you said, in the local, it's kind of flipping. Well, it's not kind of flipping, it's totally flipping. And then you constantly have a fact check to see how many times he's lied, who's recanted. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people that have worked for his campaign, worked for his administration, that are in jail or about to go to jail.
Exactly.
Like, you can't say that the top is fine and then all these people under him are doing all these things, but you don't know or you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
If everybody beneath me is doing something, I'm going to be aware of it if I'm in charge. And it's just, at some point, the jig is going to be up, and you have to
And it feels like the jig is up right now because, I mean, we've now been in this process for a number of months because Nancy Pelosi, of course, just a totally ineffective and weak leader, drags her feet on this the entire time when there were multiple chances to begin at least impeachment inquiry. If you're not going to impeach the guy, at least begin the inquiry. I mean, we could talk about his violation of the emoluments clause. We could talk about so many other things that he has done. But
ethics alone.
On ethics alone, he has been unfit for presidency from the start.
Yes.
But now we're getting to this point where now his supporters in some of these states is actually starting to slip. The only out of the top three candidates, the only one that he is beating in head to head in the key states of places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, battleground states, is Elizabeth Warren. And I think the only one she did well in was Arizona. But when it comes to Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, especially in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which Trump absolutely has to win in order to win the presidency again. If he loses those three states, he can't. It's impossible for him to win because the electorate is just not on his side. But he is underwater against those candidates. And I think that when you have somebody like Bernie Sanders who's authentic, who's not taking big money, that you're not getting, the corruption, you're regardless of how you feel about him, that when he's speaking to you, he's telling you what he honestly feels.
Right.
And I don't think that many people would be able to disagree with that. And you also have Joe Biden, despite my personal opinions about him, people still generally favor him. He's Uncle Joe, and people have an affectionate attitude towards Joe Biden, in large part because of Barack Obama presidency. And when you're dealing with those two top kind of candidates in the Rust Belt, you're going to lose 9 times out of 10 when you're, dealing with so many issues regarding foreign policy and how you're withholding aid, what you're doing with Saudi Arabia, what you're doing with Israel. He's not holding up his end of the bargain for these people anyway. Yeah. And when you add that on to things like an impeachment inquiry, when you add that on to violations of the emolument clause, when you see him consistently trying to enrich his brand through the presidency instead of upholding his bargain to the white working class that won him the election in those 3 states, it's going to flip on him badly. Because even though we don't think that Biden's presidency would create some great wave of change, I don't think anybody's foolish enough to believe that. It's still somebody who connects with the working class. That is Joe Biden's base, is the white working class, non-college educated, but that's also Trump's base. And regardless of how much people are in support of Trump in the beginning, how, energized he makes people, it's not working out anymore. We saw that on Tuesday in the elections, that there's a direct rebuking of Donald Trump in so many parts of this country. We saw it in 2018 when you saw the largest amount of turnout for the midterms in, I forgot the exact amount of years, but it was a number of years. And you're going to see that in a general election if they don't convince enough Republican senators, which the more stuff that comes out like this, with the Gordon Sondland testimony, if they don't convince enough Republican senators to flip over and get him out before 2020, those 2 candidates right there are standing to gain the most benefit from his issues that he's starting to create with his own base.
His base is, they assume that a lot of things would improve versus the Obama administration. And in some areas they might have, but overall they haven't. If they've gotten worse, and at best they've remained the same.
Yeah.
You can't actually point to anything that he's done. Like when it was in Indiana, the carrier plant. Mm-hmm. He didn't we saved it. Like, you didn't save it. You didn't save those jobs at all. Like, you actually made it easier for them to go. Exactly. And you gave them tax deductions and so many tax credits, and they still left. Like, you can't point to anything that he's done to inspire his base, to support his base, and then you throw on top of it. Exactly. And you throw on top of that all the things that have come out over these last few years. And it's just one thing after another, after another, after another. Mm-hmm. And then you see him put people in power that don't belong there. They're not educated. They're not experienced. They don't know what they're doing.
They're all in the positions that they're in to enrich themselves.
Exactly. And you see it constantly over and over with him going to Mar-a-Lago on the beginning with Melania and Barron staying in Trump Towers and the amount of security they're required.
We were paying for.
Paying hand over fist. It was something like $1 million a week or something like that.
It's really crazy.
He is running out of room. At a certain point, he's going to hit a wall. There's going to be a big red wall, and all it's going to take is one or two notable Republicans to come out against him. Like if
that happens, he's done.
He's done. Like if you get Ted Cruz to say, "I'll vote on that," or "I'll vote to impeach him," the rest are just going to fall right behind him.
And the more that they get moving in that direction, the more he's done with. But to expand upon what you were saying and to add to what you were saying as far as the base goes, this is the stuff they didn't want to see anymore.
Right.
This was part of the reason that, and there was a lot of reasons why. I mean, Trump is literally a political study of the perfect storm. Yeah. But one of the main appeals and draws that his base had to him was that, he's not your typical politician. But more and more, not only is he looking like a typical politician, he's looking like an even more corrupt version of what we already had. And he is running out of room. And if this impeachment thing goes down and they get Republican senators on their side, which, let's not hold our breaths for that to happen.
Definitely not.
Because I still highly doubt that does happen. But if it does happen and Mike Pence ends up as the 2020 nominee, he's gonna get slaughtered by all three of the top candidates by far, because he doesn't have that appeal to the base that Trump
dry. He's uber religious, and he's oddly religious, and not in an evangelical way, but more of a strict kind of like sect.
He plays it by he's like an Old Testament Christian.
Yes. Yeah, it's your wife's on the period, put on a lawn, type stuff. It's
he's a pretty sick dude.
He is, and also you look in Indiana, a lot of his policies didn't work in Indiana, so you can't continue that. You can't say that my platform is entirely different than what I did as governor. It's also
he's gonna try to run on the Trump platform, and it's not gonna work, right? Because that's not who he is, and that's not who he believes himself to be, and it's dangerous. It's a dangerous game for the Republicans to play. I think that they truly are starting to worry that even if somehow, this dude's been Teflon from the jump. So even if somehow he slips through yet another crack in the system, it's just damaging you. You cannot have a sitting president walk into a re-election bid at 38% approval, at having quid pro quo impeachment investigations being done on you, violating the emoluments clause, when you have your two main rivals for presidency, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, are running on a pro-worker class platform, and you're dealing with all these high dollar, high crime events in your life. And I'm telling you now, those people in Michigan, when they see this, those people in Wisconsin, those people in Pennsylvania, this is the type of stuff that makes them really start to think, what has Donald Trump actually done for me beyond rhetoric? Right. Because, of course, we can always say that there was a racial motivation to getting him in office, that it was a visceral reaction to having the first black president. Those are absolute facts and factors into him becoming president. But, again, a significant amount of people flipped from people who voted for Barack Obama twice to someone who voted for Donald Trump. So it was more of a rebuke of the political structure that Clinton represented than it was Trump being some, a great politician or great leader. But those people, that small amount of people, those 75,000 votes, these are the type of events that happen in a presidency, which triggered your base to say, you know what? He hasn't actually done anything for me. He bullshitted me. He lied to my face. And now, I need to look for a different alternative.
You might get a reaction of kind of like Trump and Hillary, where they just may not vote, which is detrimental to him. If they don't vote, he's going to get slaughtered, because you've got millennials becoming more active. You got millions of new voters coming up, and they all are pretty much all supporting Bernie Sanders. Yeah. So even if it's not Bernie and it's Elizabeth Warren who's Bernie-like,
right,
you're not going to come close to anything. And
you're not
like when he came in, he spoke to him, he pulled on their heartstrings, and you had 4 years to do something. What did you do?
Nothing. Oh, he built that wall that I guess you can buy a $100 saw to start cutting through.
Yeah.
So I mean, he did that, and Mexico didn't pay for it either. And yeah, I hope that he gets impeached. I hope that it is Mike Pence 2020, so they could suffer an even worse defeat. But we'll have to sit and wait. But on Tuesday, if we're gonna continue to talk about the rebuking of Donald Trump on Tuesday in Kentucky, Republicans won every single thing up and down the ticket except for the governorship. They lost their gubernatorial race in Mitch McConnell's home state. This was after Donald Trump went to one of the key counties in the state to try to rally his the base to come out and support, but it did not happen. Bashir ended up winning the governor's seat, and this should be a message to Democrats all over this country. He didn't win running on identity politics. He didn't win on, being anti-Trump, those are not winning messages because it doesn't inspire anybody. Just, great. You're not for what most people are not for. Congratulations. You are for what most people are for. What are you going to do for me? Like you said earlier, that's what this is about in Kentucky. That's what this is becoming about around this country. And race after race, we saw it in 2018 when we saw the blue wave come in, take over the House. We saw people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez run on a worker class message, one. We saw Rashida Tlaib run on a working class message, one. We saw Ilhan Omar, and now we're seeing it happen in deep red states. This is disastrous for Donald Trump because he's a fake populist. He's not somebody who believes in what he says. He has no ideology whatsoever other than Donald Trump.
Making $1,
that's all it's about. And so when you have legitimate people running on a working class, working rights campaign, this is the type of response that you get. And it should be a lesson for all 2020 Democratic presidential hopefuls, including Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden, in case they do win that nomination, that you don't run on, this is not America. We're fighting for the soul of the country. And no one is inspired to turn out to vote for that. No one, you can't knock on someone's door and say, hey, can you vote for Joe Biden? And you say, why should I vote for Joe Biden? He's fighting for the soul of America. They're going to look at you like, dude, what? I got work in a few hours, man. I don't have time for this. And you have to really you have to really be on top of the working class message. People want to know what you're going to do for them. That's what they want to know about. They don't want to keep on hearing about the Trump and Russia stuff. They don't want to hear about and all support to all communities, but they don't want to hear about Pete Buttigieg's sexuality. They don't want to hear about how Elizabeth Warren is a woman. They don't want to hear about this. They don't want to hear about age. They don't want to hear about any of this stuff. They don't even really want to hear about democratic socialism and communism and capitalism. They want to know one thing: what are you going to do for me? And what Bashir ran on was pro-workers, pro-unions. It was union families, whether it was teacher unions or trade unions, that got him that seat. And now he's the governor of Kentucky. We saw also in the Virginia elections, Democrats took control of the state Senate and the state House for the first time in many decades. And now they have full control of that state. And that is near Trump country. And this is a bad look for Donald Trump. And this is why when the reports came out about a month and a half ago that in closed door meetings, he's saying that socialism is going to be tough to beat. It's not necessarily socialism. It's the socialism infused messages of pro-worker. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren talking about breaking up these big companies that control too much of the market. Right. When you're talking about putting workers on the board of governors for the different corporations, when you're talking about raising the minimum wage, when you're talking about Medicare for all, this doesn't really keep people trapped at work the way it does now. I mean, how many people hate their job, but they're saying, you know what? It gives me health insurance. So I'm just gonna have to clock in and just fuck it, just do it. That's not freedom. No. That is controlling people. That is controlling where you get to work and what you get to do in life. And when you talk about pro-worker stuff, that resonates with everybody because everybody has those feelings of waking up like, man, I really don't want to go to work today.
Yeah. You got typically, what is it, the AFL-CIO, whoever they support, usually wins in a lot of places. But my take on it is a little bit different than yours because I'm kind of looking at it from retrospect when the Tea Party came in and you had people in power, Democrats were in power, and they flipped a lot of these places that were Democratic seats for 20 plus years. Yeah. And it's okay, you had all this time, but you've done nothing.
You've done nothing with it.
Which is one of my biggest beef about the Obama administration. You had both houses for 2 years and you didn't do anything with it. And then the Tea Party came in and swept in.
Oh, he did do something with it. He saved Wall Street, bro. Saved the big bank. They needed
it. That is true. But the platform that most Democrats are running on is kind of similar to what the Tea Party ran on. And it's weird because...
Anti-establishment.
Right. And the Tea Party got in power and then they became the establishment. And it's like, okay, you're no different. And then you've got all of these much younger Democrats coming in and saying, okay, this was wrong. And they're pointing out things that their party did wrong, which resonates. It's the authenticity. It's okay. I know my mistakes. I can change this. This is what matters to you. So it's what matters to me.
Absolutely.
And the Republicans, they talk a good game, but they don't do anything.
They don't do anything with it.
It's just lame duckness in people holding off on things that don't toe their party lines. Yep. And they vote with the party 90% of the time. And it's not what's best for their base.
No, and I mean, and it's so funny too with the Republicans. Like, they're always the ones who are talking about, oh, we have to put country over party, and oh, we love America, we're such patriots. It's like, dude, no, you're not. You know, you guys are against wage raises. You guys are against unionizing. And not to say that no Democrats are against these things, because there are quite a few of them. Yeah. But this is mainly Republican stance to be against these things. And out of the two corrupt parties, clearly the Republicans they're pretty much too far gone at this point. Yeah. Like, especially with someone like Mitch McConnell. And also, let's be clear about something too. Just because a Democratic governor won in Kentucky does not mean Mitch McConnell's getting ready to get voted out. Yeah. And I need people to understand that. And Mitch McConnell holds an incredible amount of power in Kentucky. He built that Republican machine in that state, county by county. And yeah, he's polling at 23%, 24%. He's not very popular, not very well liked because he doesn't, quote unquote, align with the president. But don't make the mistake of getting overzealous, of thinking that, you know, Amy McGarth or whoever is running against McConnell in 2020 is getting ready to take his Senate seat, because that most likely is not going to even come close to being true. No. But having said that, though, these election results, the way that they occurred, where did it start with? It starts with the Fight for 15. It starts with the teachers organizing and striking in Virginia, in Kentucky, and so many different parts of this country. This continuously is happening, and it's happening around the world right now. In Chile, in so many different spots, where people are rebuking these neoliberal, neoconservative systems of capitalism and control, of allowing corporate greed and wealth to be expanded, while what we get back in return continues to diminish. And in 2020, the Democrats cannot afford to misread the electorate this time like they did in 2016. In 2016, they made the mistake of thinking what people want is the same old, same old. Right. They thought that Barack Obama's charm and swagger would rub off on the ticket because he was Barack Obama. And as another thing that pisses me off about hearing that Pete Buttigieg comparison, that because Obama is like, whether you like him, whether you dislike him, whether you're indifferent, he's the most talented politician of our lifetime. And before that, he's incredibly talented. And that led Democrats to believing that, you know, oh, it's okay. If we have Obama endorse the Democratic ticket, then we'll be fine. People will turn out and vote for us. That's not true. Americans are not as ideologically aligned as so many of these parties and establishment media figures think that they are. And you cannot mistake the electorate this time. You have got to make sure that whoever is the nominee is running pro-worker, not anti-Trump, not we have to beat Trump, not Trump and Russia, because we all know that. Like, he's at 38% approval. We don't need to be told that you're against Donald Trump. You're the Democratic nominee. I'm assuming you're against Donald Trump. You need to run on this is what has been wrong, and this is how I'm going to address it, and these are our plans for the future to make sure that they do not occur again.
Platform.
Absolutely.
Look at the top three, their platforms, the key points, they all align or are pretty similar. Some may tweak it a little bit, but they give you just enough that they all kind of fit within that pinhole. And that's another reason why we got like 55% of Democrats that want to support another candidate, because the top three, their platform are very, very similar. Yeah. And that's why Pete is not really doing well, because his platform is not the same as theirs. It's a little bit more corporate friendly. Yeah. But you've got, as you said, it has to be pro-worker, and it has to be something that's tangible and not just words.
Something that gets people out to vote.
Exactly.
Gives them a reason.
And you got Elizabeth who's saying she's got a plan for that, and she's explained some of her plans. You got Bernie laying everything out there.
Bernie's platform is 40 years strong.
Yeah. It's the same thing that he's been saying, and he's honest, he's true, and it's clear, and you know what he's going to do for you.
Yeah. Speaking of Bernie Sanders, he is surging in the polls. The most reliable national poll came out this past week, and it had Joe Biden at 23%, it had Bernie Sanders at 20%, and it had Elizabeth Warren at 20%, but more closer to the 19 number. But effectively what it showed is that there is a statistical tie. The margin of error for the poll was 3.4%. So there's a statistical tie among the top three candidates. And this is bad news for anybody who was hoping that Bernie or Warren did not get the nomination. And what it showed was that Bernie is up 5% in this poll, while Joe Biden has fallen 5%, and Elizabeth Warren has fallen 2% in this poll. And polls are not everything, but they're an indicator of the mood of the electorate, at least as far as we can tell at this point in the race. And this comes after he had his heart attack, and everyone's like, well, I mean, come on. Like,
right.
You know, your old dude, just drop out, endorse Warren, call it a day. But he comes out, he's swinging. He has a 26,000 people rally with AOC upon her endorsement in New York. He turns around, he goes to Detroit, and gives his best speech of his presidential campaigns, both 2016 and 2020 in Detroit, where Rashida Tlaib endorsed him. And then he goes to Minnesota, he electrifies that crowd, 10,000 people show up, she endorses him. I mean, it is just amazing to see. And I think that what mainstream media wanted to happen was, okay, we could at least stomach Warren. Right. She's more willing to play team ball than Bernie. And so I don't think that they were ever on her side per se, but it was more wish casting with Joe Biden falling that, okay, well, if we have to pick one of these two, we're going to pick Warren because she doesn't present as big of an immediate threat as Bernie would. But now that's in total reverse. And in addition to this poll, Bernie Sanders is leading among all presidential candidates for individual donations, smaller dollar donations of $200 or less among Latinos. He's leading all candidates in small dollar donations of $200 or less among women. He is starting to surge in these polls. And in Iowa, where 54% of his supporters said they are excited to turn up and vote for him, and in a caucus, that is very important because for people who are not familiar with caucuses, you have to stand in line for a very long time, much longer than a primary, because you're not just simply casting your ballot. You have to wait for all the people to be counted. Then they have to do the math. And then if your candidate doesn't make the 15% margin, then you get to go to another candidate of your choosing. So there's a lot of time invested. And when it comes to caucus states, like Iowa, like Nevada, I keep telling people, it's about turning out your base. It's about motivating them. It's about who believes in your message. And time again in these polls, whether he's going up, whether he's going down or remaining steady, Bernie Sanders' numbers have fluctuated the least amount for all of the contenders versus a Warren or Joe Biden who have gone up and they've gone down. And just what is your take as far as that's happening?
It's the same thing. It's authenticity. Bernie is the most authentic candidate that is out there in the field. And his message is resonating with people. And he's gotten more traction now than he had against Hillary.
Because his name ID is blown up.
Right. And which brings me back to kind of similar to Obama's run. Mm-hmm. The way that Bernie is moving is the same way. Obama had that red state and blue state speech that put him on the map.
Yep.
Nobody outside of Illinois knew who Barack Obama was.
And most people in Illinois probably didn't know who he was.
They probably didn't. They just didn't want to vote for the other guy.
You're right.
Who nobody remembers. But he got that traction, and then people started to pay attention to him. And then they started to write him off. And then he won Iowa.
Exactly.
And then he won this. Then he won that. Then he won this. Then, as you said, the small dollar donations. That was Obama's thing. That was
he wanted to
Obama's
get
thing.
People, and I don't think people appreciate this enough when it comes to small dollar donations. These are coming from people that work at Walmart, Starbucks, McDonald's, companies like that. Spending $20
will make or break a budget or what you're doing for your household for that month, that week, whatever it may be.
That's a huge financial decision for some people.
And like with Obama, it was a lot of people that were on fixed incomes that were giving. And it's the same thing with Bernie. People don't have this to spare, and to the fact that they don't have it to spare and they're willing to give it to you
on a committed monthly basis,
it means that what you are doing, what you are saying, is the truth, and they have a backing of you, unlike a Hillary Clinton or a Trump, when they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, no, we believe in you.
Yeah, we believe in you.
We support you. Yep. We know your history, know what you've done. And anybody that is attempting to discredit what Bernie's done, Bernie's been the same guy for decades. And with the age of information, like, that's at your fingertips. You can see what they voted. You can see how they voted, and it's the same.
And remember earlier when I was telling you about those counties that voted twice for Obama, then flipped to Trump. Bernie's raising more money out of those counties than anybody in the Democratic field or Donald Trump. And as far as Democrats are concerned, he's the only person that has more individual donors than Donald Trump does.
Voters are waking up. What those counties are is what that blue wall used to be. And he's tapping back into that because he knows the work of strife, and he's going to do something about it.
Economic populism works in the Rust Belt. That's what people want to be told. People know that they have gotten screwed by these terrible trade deals, that these trade deals have done nothing but prop up corporate power and greed and income while accosting the typical average American. And when you have somebody like that who comes out and says, hey, I was against this stuff, and here goes the proof of me being against that. And then you have other people who are saying that stuff was bad, but it wasn't that bad. At least it wasn't as bad as what Donald Trump is doing. One message is going to resonate because somebody is saying Donald Trump sucks and I want to change what's going on now and what led to Donald Trump, while you have some people saying Donald Trump sucks, so just go back to the way things used to be. Like, that's not going to work with people. And when you get over 1 million individual donors, when you have thousands of volunteers in these states that are going door to door, that are knocking on doors, that are talking to people, that are text banking, phone banking, that's something that polls do not pick up on. Because it shows there that you have, out of everybody, the most ability to expand your electorate. You have the biggest ability to expand your base. I remember back in September, New York Times did a map to show like where these candidates are getting who's getting the most individual small dollar donations out of all the candidates. And the map was, and everybody had their own color. Bernie's color was blue. The map was so blue, except for Texas, where Beto O'Rourke was getting the most contributions. So they had to do a second map to show like, oh, other people are still getting, contributions. It's just like not as dedicated as Bernie's is. And He's rising at the right time. I'd argue that this is the time where you want to rise. This is the time where people are now is getting cold. They're staying in more. They're starting to pay more attention to what's on television, which is going to be political ads, which is going to be advertisements for these debates that are going to be coming up this month and next month. This is the time, a point in time where you want to start rising in the polls. You don't want to go in the summer and be taking a jump like Kamala Harris did, and then it fades as time goes on because you have American election cycles are ridiculously long. I mean, for example, Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, Trump Jr., they're going to be running in 6 weeks, like for a prime minister. And what are we doing? We're a year out from the general election, let alone the primaries coming up in the next few months. But you don't want to take that summer bump. You don't want to take that early fall bump. You want to get it right into the middle around the holiday season when it's getting cold, when people are staying inside. So that way now your message is not only where it has been at, and for Bernie it's been mainly like the internet, social media among young people. Now you're starting to get these ads for older people. Now you're starting to get older people to tune into the debates. Now you're starting to get the thing that you need done. That's energy on the ground, that's phone banking, that's texting, that's the donation. All of that is coming together at the right time for Bernie Sanders. And I think that's why Michael Bloomberg entered the race. I think that if Joe Biden was doing better, he wouldn't have entered the race. And honestly, out of all the people who I think shouldn't be running for president, and there's pretty much everybody except for the top three, I think shouldn't be running for president because you're literally not going to win.
Right.
Michael Bloomberg was the one I was the happiest with because this is going to give Bernie, like if he makes it, I don't think he's going to make the November one because it's just too late to qualify. But if he makes the December debate and he and he's just on stage with Bernie, this gives Bernie the opportunity to literally look into the camera and say, this guy to my left or to my right is exactly what I'm talking about. The only reason why Michael Bloomberg is relevant for running for president is not because he was a mayor of New York. They don't even mention that when they talk about Michael Bloomberg. They say billionaire Michael Bloomberg. And that's the only reason he's relevant is because he's a billionaire. So he's going to be able to buy these interviews for CNN and MSNBC and potentially Fox News and ABC and all these other big conglomerate media organizations. He's going to be able to buy hundreds of millions of dollars worth of advertising online and on television and things like that. But the only reason at the core why we even know that Michael Bloomberg is running for president is because he's not some Joe Schmo. He's somebody who's worth $53 billion. And this is what Bernie and to a lesser degree Warren, they're going to be able to now look at two billionaires on stage, Tom Steyer and Michael Bloomberg, and they're going to be able to tell people, think about why these people are on stage with us right now. Think about why we're having a serious discussion on why we have to change the structure of American politics, the structure of our economy, the structure of our criminal justice system, and somehow or another, these billionaires who have nothing to complain about in life, you have everything at your feet. You get to now step on the stage and try to run for president. And if Joe Biden was doing better, there's no way the Democratic establishment would have signed off on this. And trust me, they were signing off on this one because they are terrified that Joe Biden is going to lose the nomination, and more specifically that Bernie Sanders is going to end up winning the nomination.
Joe ran at the wrong time. Joe should have ran when he was vice president. He would have had enough strength.
Well, Obama told him twice not to run.
Yeah.
He told him in 2016, like, if you run, people are going to look at you as another old white guy. And then before Joe Biden announced this time, and you talk about an endorsement from, like, people are like, oh, why hasn't Obama endorsed his vice president yet? Maybe because before Joe announced, Barack Obama literally called this man and told him, Joe, you don't have to do this. That's him telling you, like, man, please don't run for president. Like, just don't do it, dude. Like, and I don't think if Joe Biden was going to win presidency, it was going to be 2008, where he got crushed so bad in Iowa. I think he got like 3% of the vote that he had to drop out like that night of the from the presidential race. But Joe Biden is a product of a time period in politics that is gone. He is a Mesozoic fossil. Like, nobody wants to hear about your they're not even half measures at this point. I mean, he's sitting there talking about, oh, Republicans are going to have an epiphany. Like, give me a break, dude. You were vice president for Barack Obama. They would not even let Obama pass something like a public option. You know this from experience. And you're sitting here talking about how, they're going to have an epiphany.
Their platform was repeal and replace.
That's the only reason why the Tea Party came to be and got a significant amount of power in the Republican Party, because it was a visceral reaction to a black man becoming president.
Yes.
Literally. And you think that these people are about to have an epiphany? Like, we have to get out of this mindset of playing nice with Republicans because, you got to work both sides of the aisle. They don't work both sides of the aisle. They say, this is our platform, this is what we're going to pass, do something about it. And I was just listening to something earlier this week, and the host brought up a good point, and he said that Democrats bring their stats and notebooks to gunfights. And that's so true. And it's happening now in the Democratic primaries. And that's why Bernie Sanders is starting to surge again, because when we sit down and we think about the issues that we're facing in this country, when we're talking about, even in a broader sense, the world, when we're talking about the climate crisis, when we're talking about economic growth, when we're talking about wages, when we're talking about healthcare, education, these are very important things to people. And when you have someone coming out with their milquetoast solutions, and you have somebody as dry and boring as a Mayor Pete or Amy Klobuchar, who don't have really anything different to offer you, it's more of the standard same old shit politics of yesterday, what's going to happen is you're going to get what you never wanted. And I'm talking about for the Democratic establishment. And that's, you're going to get Bernie Sanders running as president, for president. And if he wins, they're going to be in even worse shape. And, let's not make the mistake of assuming that every single one of his dream policy proposals is going to pass, because that's not going to happen.
No.
But what is going to happen is that a significant portion of them will, or at least in the version that gets the ball rolling in the right direction once and for all. And the difference between Bernie Sanders and someone like an Elizabeth Warren is that we know that Elizabeth Warren can cross her T's and dot her I's with the best of them. She has her plans, they're detailed, they're technocratic. That's her. She's a law professor. But she does not have the organic grassroots movement that Bernie Sanders has. So when Bernie Sanders says, I'm not only going to be the commander-in-chief, I'm going to be the organizer-in-chief, he means that, because that's who he is in his roots. He's an organizer. He's not a standard, Harvard-bred politician. He's somebody who started fighting on the ground. He started fighting with people. And now that he's in this position that he's in, he's taking it to the next level. And when you have somebody, and I don't think people appreciate the power of the presidency enough as far as domestic issues go, because it really is a bully pulpit. When Trump became the nominee, the Republican establishment was not all in for Donald Trump.
Not at all.
They were pretty much resistant to him. And what ended up happening? Trump ended up having, still was doing his rallies and stuff like that. And he'd go into states of senators who already were unpopular, and he'd hold these rallies, and he'd just go off the cuff and say what Trump says. And he started intimidating them, because it was no longer, oh my God, like the drug companies or the military-industrial complex or these oil companies are running ads against me in my campaign. Now I have the president of the United States literally making global headlines, crushing me in my own state for not supporting his agenda. And so when Bernie Sanders says, I'm going to get people, the Democrats, to support my agenda, the Democrats in office, because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to their cities, I'm going to go to their states, I'm going to go to their districts, and I'm going to hold rallies of thousands of people. That's different from having Senator Bernie Sanders do that versus President Bernie Sanders do that. And that's what we all thought that Barack Obama was going to do. Like you said, he built a powerful, powerful grassroots machine. It was his email list was coveted by everybody. I'm pretty sure he could have made millions selling that email list. And what ended up happening, though, is once he got into office, he let those grassroots organizations wither and die. He no longer had the pressure from the outside as well as the pressure he can bring himself from the inside. And he threw all that capital away. That's not going to happen with Bernie Sanders. He's not a bought-off politician. He doesn't want Goldman Sachs as a commerce advisor. He doesn't want You know, he doesn't want all these people coming in from Wall Street to now become education secretaries and secretaries of energy and this, that, and the other. He's resonating with real people because he's going to run a real campaign and he's going to have a real presidency.
Okay. Answer me this. Who would you say in history is the greatest president of anyone? Like, at all 40-something of them. Who was the best?
Probably FDR.
What did FDR run on?
Economic populism.
Barack came in as FDR. He gave you this hope and this appeal that you thought he was going to make a lot of change. Mm-hmm. Then when he became president, he became Bill Clinton.
Yep.
And it's not bad, but it's not what you said.
It's not the change that you were promising.
Right. And now Bernie's running as FDR, and Bernie's going to stay FDR.
Out of all the politicians that have ran for president in the last however many presidential cycles we've been alive for, there's been no one that's cut it close to Bernie Sanders.
No.
Who do you believe is going to get into the White House and not backtrack on what he said?
Right, and then he's going to push, and he's going to be more aggressive than Obama was against his own party and the Republicans. And if they don't toe the line enough, a lot of those Democrats are going to be replaced.
They're going to be replaced. You're going to have the president of the United States endorsing grassroots Senate runs, grassroots House of Representative runs. That is unheard. That's an unprecedented thing to occur in American politics.
It's toppling the political structure as we know it. And nobody wants that. All of these people that have 10, 12 terms as reps and senates and all of this, like, they're career politicians.
Exactly.
And they've made millions off of it. Mm-hmm. Outside of it, you have people looking as in what have you done? You cannot point to anything that they've done. Nancy Pelosi has been rep countless times, and she's been Speaker of the House countless times. Every time she comes right back, and she does nothing. There's nothing you can point to.
She raises a lot of millions of dollars from our wealthy campaign contributors.
What the fuck does that have to do with
we want her as a House Speaker? Why wouldn't we, you stupid everyday Americans? And you're absolutely right, though. And I'm telling you now, that Iowa caucus, don't overlook the chances of Bernie Sanders winning that. And for another reason as well. If Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard supporters can't make up 15% each,
correct,
those supporters can then go and assign their support to any candidate that they want to. And there's no doubt in my mind that Tulsi Gabbard supporters and Andrew Yang, let's just go off the recent Iowa poll and say that they both make up 3% each, so 6% altogether. If you're telling me that Bernie Sanders, who's in a statistical tie for first place in Iowa, gets an extra 6% bump on caucus day, that's something that you cannot put into a poll.
No.
You
can. The poll that says that 50 to 55% of Democratic voters want to vote for another candidate, and they're not going to make up for it. So that swing is going to go to. It's not going to Joe. It's not going to Joe. It's going to go to Elizabeth, or it's going to go to Bernie. Mm-hmm. My money's on Bernie.
My money's on Bernie too, and he's probably going to win New Hampshire. And if Bernie Sanders wins Iowa and New Hampshire,
it's over.
Nevada's the third state to vote. That's another caucus state, and that's where Bernie gets his most Hispanic support from. And that's a huge voting block in Nevada, is the Hispanic vote. I'm telling you now, if he wins those first three states, then he's definitely going to roll his way to the nomination. Because right after that, and this is so key in this thing, is that California has now moved up to the first Super Tuesday. And if he gets that type of momentum going into Super Tuesday, and he gets California, and he gets a couple more of those states, this nomination might be wrapped up pretty quickly.
In California right now is the heartbeat for what the Democratic Party represents.
Absolutely.
I mean, you got the economy, and the strength of their economy is like top 5 versus
in
countries.
The world. Yeah,
like. You can't.
That's why it's always so funny when conservatives are like, California doesn't like this country. They can secede from the country. Like, no, they can't, because we suffer from it. We need their economy.
It's not even close. And some of the other ones that are growing at their rate, they all got one thing in common. They all legalize marijuana.
They all legalize marijuana. And that, actually, that's another thing that I wanted to add too. for another reason why I think there's a spike coming in his polling is because the marijuana plan that he released recently, where our communities stand to gain the most from it economically, as far as the investment, as far as the tax revenue, and as far as keeping, and this is a huge important part of his legislation and why it's so groundbreaking, is that it keeps big tobacco and cigarette companies out of the marijuana industry. And if you're a company that has been accused or convicted of false advertisement or knowingly selling your product and making people sick, like the tobacco industry, you cannot partake in this. And every marijuana company is going to have 51% of normal everyday people as a part of their governing board. So I think that it's just a combination of his authenticity, his proposals that he's coming out with, and the fact that he got these endorsements at such a key time. I think that we're going to continue to see his rise. I think that we're going to continue to see Joe Biden's fall.
Couldn't agree more.
So Elizabeth Warren released her Medicare for All plan after being pressured by Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden and others for how she's going to pay for it. And honestly, some of the proposals that she's making for paying for it is kind of crazy. As far as the employer head tax, it gives an advantage to large corporations because obviously they'd be able to afford a higher payroll tax. And in effect, you are taxing people without technically saying you're taxing people. So, I mean, but beyond the problems of her bill, which we're going to get back to, we'll top this conversation off with that. I have to talk about this in a broader sense because the fact of the matter is most Americans aren't going to look into the details of this bill.
Definitely not.
Like, let's be real. And so now, not only have you come out with a wordy bill that, I mean, Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All resonates so hard because it's like Medicare for All. And you say three simple things that everybody can understand and appreciate. No co-payments, no premiums, and no deductibles. I mean, literally, the most effective messaging on Medicare is that. Not Medicare for all who want it, not this, that, and the other, and not Elizabeth Warren's version of Medicare for all. And the thing about Elizabeth Warren now is this is the second time she has been goaded by her opponents into doing something that she never wanted to do to begin with. It started with Donald Trump calling her Pocahontas, and she ended up, releasing these DNA results that she should have never taken. And in the most cringy video I've ever seen in my life, she's sitting there and talking with the DNA expert, and he's telling her, yeah, it does turn out you have some Native American blood. It's like 1/1024th of Native American blood in her system. And it's like, you're not vindicating yourself. Even if it came back that you were 51% Native American, you're not vindicating yourself because that's not the point of this. The point is to get you to have a reaction, period, because it keeps Trump in the headline. The same thing for this Medicare for All. Pete Buttigieg does, first of all, back in February of last year, and I believe at the beginning of this campaign cycle, Pete Buttigieg was for Medicare for All and Bernie Sanders' version of the bill. He is getting more money than anybody from executives of health insurance and pharmaceutical companies. So if you want to know what corruption means in our political process and what money means in our political process, Pete Buttigieg, who's taking more money than anybody from health insurance executives and pharmaceutical executives, has now changed his tune from, I'm 100% for Medicare for all in the way that Bernie Sanders is describing it, to now, you know what, we can't do it. We're going to do a public option, which, again, as stated before, is a huge wet kiss to the health insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And Warren allows him to call her out on Medicare for all. And her bill costs more than Bernie Sanders' bill. Is $50 trillion in comparison to $32 trillion. And yes, that's a lot of money on both ends, but I do need to be 100% clear here that over the next 10 years, we're projected to spend more than both of those proposals anyway on our current healthcare system. So when people say, how can we afford single payer healthcare? We can barely afford the system that we have now, and we're not even top 10 in the world as far as quality outcome of healthcare. So this is a problem to me, though, because she's going to get into the general. And while I do think that she has what it takes to beat Donald Trump as far as policy goes, as far as the wonkiness goes, that professor attitude of I'm going to beat you over the head with details, she's too easily pulled into a mud fight with him. And she's too easily put into a mud fight with Pete Buttigieg and with Joe Biden and all this other stuff. Instead of just saying it straight up, like Bernie Sanders says, yeah, you're going to pay more in taxes. I'm not going to lie to you about it. You will pay more in taxes. What you get in exchange for the taxes is the important part, which is you get quality, comprehensive health care that covers your dental, it covers vision, it covers hearing, it covers everything you need other than vanity surgeries. It covers everything you need and no out-of-pocket expenses. And you will no longer have co-payments, deductibles, and premiums. Instead of staying on message for that one, she falls for the okie doke and she releases this wordy Medicare for All proposal, which is very shady as far as the transition time is concerned. Now, Representative Pramila Jayapal came out and said that she spoke to Warren and that it's still a 4-year transition period, in similar ways to Bernie's bill. But even still, this is just, to me, a disastrous move for Elizabeth Warren. And it makes me question whether or not she can handle a general election.
She can't handle it because she can't. See, you have to have a moral high ground as to when to respond and who to respond to.
Exactly.
I'm not responding to somebody that's polling at 2%. Like, I'm just not. You're
or
beneath
someone
me.
With 0% in the black polls.
Exactly. Like, you gain nothing from responding to that, and all you did was make yourself a larger target, and you gave them something to poke holes in. If you didn't give them anything, they can't nitpick your plan.
Exactly.
Now, as you stated, that the taxes will be slightly higher, but over time the taxes will decrease because if, say, Bernie is elected and he actually gets to tax the top 1% at the rate that he wants to, which is what was like 50% or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you get that, and then it'll eventually decrease. But if you go in for a monthly checkup and then you add up what you're spending for your co-pays, and you factor it into what the taxes will increase to, is not that big of a difference. You only getting you're only paying an extra few $100s, but you're not getting the same level of service that you would with your insurance, because the insurance has so many loopholes as far as your out-of-pocket expenses, as far as what's covered and what's not. Like, if you really read what's in your insurance and what's covered and what's not, you will be for Medicare for All, because as you said, it's anything that's not cosmetic.
Exactly.
And I think it's still something.
Vanity surgery, actually.
Yeah. Vanity surgery.
You're someone who just wants to get, like, lip injections or Botox or something like that, just for the sake of looking the way you want to look. No, Medicare for All is not going to cover that.
Right, but it will cover some cosmetic surgeries, for as like cleft palates, and if you were in an accident or something like that, it's certain things.
Soldiers, that might come back without a limb or something like that.
Yeah, it'll cover all of that stuff. So you're getting far more forward. But as we said earlier, the only one that can go toe to toe with Trump is Bernie, because I don't think that Elizabeth can remain composed on the stage with Trump. I think Joe Biden will fall asleep, or he might just say something.
What's going to happen, and this needs to be said, because presidential debates matter so much more than primary debates do, because so many more people are watching. And what's going to happen is Joe's going to go off on one of those tangents where he keeps cutting himself off because, he can't remember what he was going to say. And Trump is just going to hit him with one of those damn one-liners. There he goes, folks. Sleepy Joe. This is Joe the man that you want to become president.
Overtly racist, which he's known to do. Like he says things that are mildly racist. And you can't do that on a national stage. And you can't.
And especially when we're talking about something that is healthcare, which when it comes to healthcare, it is an extremely complex, nuanced conversation to have. Like, healthcare is not something that is just, even for a Medicare for All from Bernie's proposal, it's not something as simple as like, okay, we're just going to go in and do this. And this is an important part to take away, and why Elizabeth Warren made the mistake of releasing the details of her proposal to begin with. When it comes to presidential platforms, what people have to understand is that the agendas that these candidates are presenting is not going to be everything that you want once it comes and gets codified in the law. And the reason why is because the president does not have unilateral power to just say, okay, I want Medicare for all exactly how I wrote it out, and this is how it's going to be.
System of checks and balances.
Exactly. So it's going to go into Congress, and Congress is then going to negotiate with the president on what's coming into this bill and what's coming out of it. So for Bernie Sanders, he said, yeah, I'm going to give you a menu option of how we're going to pay for Medicare for all for $32 trillion over a 10-year period. That's the way to go about it, because he's going to give Congress the options of, okay, you want to pay for it this way, that way, or a combination of ways. Versus Warren, who's saying, no, this is how we're going to pay for it now. And in the long run, that would be a short-term gain if she were to pass a law that was, verbatim what she wrote down. But the problem is that in the long term, you're punishing small businesses and you're creating an enormous gap that's not going to be able to sustain your version of Medicare for all. It's not sustainable. Bernie Sanders' plan was researched by a Koch brothers funded research company. And if you know anything about the Koch brothers, the reason why the Republican Party is the way it is because of the Koch brothers and the candidates that they supported as far as the Tea Party goes and things like that. But when they conducted their research on the Medicare for all proposal from Bernie Sanders, what they ended up finding was that the $32 trillion that we'll spend over a 10-year period saves us about $1.8 trillion a year over a 10-year period. So if there's any study that was ever going to come out to try to debunk Medicare for all by saying it's way too expensive and we'll never be able to have it, it's that. And yet and still that did not come to be. And so when we talk about Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for all, we're talking about $50 trillion. That's a hard pill to swallow. And I don't know if she's doing this to, like, at this point promote Bernie, or if she's just becoming a caricature of herself. Because it's like, you have a plan for everything. You should have never ran on that to begin with, because eventually someone's going to be like, Joe, what's your plan for this? And then when you come out with it, they're going to be like, thanks, now I can pick you apart in the next debate. And it's just a ridiculous thing to do. And this is the problem that I have with presidential politics sometimes, is that instead of just saying, you know what, this person had a good policy proposal, I'm going to sign on to that because I think that's a good idea. Everybody has to come out with their own version of everything. And it gets ridiculous at some point in time. It gets to the point where it's just like, you've just made this more complicated than it needs to be. And this is what Elizabeth Warren has contributed now to the Medicare for all conversation, is now people are no longer going to look at Bernie's plan, which now looks like a bargain compared to $50 trillion. They're going to look at that $50 trillion and say, see, Medicare for all costs too much. Now they're going to acknowledge how much we pay for healthcare and say, oh, we're already on $50 trillion. Why should we go to her $50 trillion? It's not even going to pass Congress.
Then she handed the Republican Party their biggest sticking point that they've always used is the Democrats always increase the deficit. The Democrats always
exactly.
The Democrats. And it's like, dude, come on. Like you handing this to them. Like, if you get the nod, you can't use this plan because that plan in itself is going to be your downfall.
It is.
Like it.
There's no way you can stomach. Like, you can stomach $32 trillion because you can say, hey, that's $18 trillion less than what we're going to be paying anyway, so we might as well do it. You can't stomach $50 trillion versus $50 trillion. That does not motivate people to come out. And, the problem is that she wants to be so different from Bernie Sanders, and she doesn't need to be. You clearly have your own lane, and I understand it's not the same base as Bernie's base. Hers is more affluent, college-educated white. She doesn't have very great support among the African-American community.
No.
But in an effort to make yourself so different, in an effort to stand out so much, you might have just cost yourself the nominee.
Right.
The nomination. And this is not a help for the Medicare for all discussion. This is something that Biden and Buttigieg are going to continue to use to attack Medicare for all. It is something that they're going to use to drive down support for Medicare for all, for enthusiasm for it. And, but at the same time, I have to say that it helps Bernie out, because now Bernie gets to look at her plan and the standard plans and say, hey, Mine is like $18 trillion less than all these dudes.
And it gives you more. Like hers is the same. It's what we're spending, and you're not getting much more.
Right.
Like, why would you change? Like, if I'm not getting anything different, why would I change?
And the transition period thing is another one. Like, just come out and say, okay, it's going to be a 4-year transition period, or somehow Kamala Harris's team a month or so ago came out and said, yeah, we're going to have a 10-year transition period for Medicare for all, which is obviously insane and unworkable. But
Kamala's plans are absolutely ludicrous. And
she doesn't have any support anymore because people are racist and sexist. But when she was polling at 20%, she was still a black woman. So I don't know.
Again, it's the age of information. When
exactly.
your history will come back, and at some point, somebody is going to throw it all out there.
Yep. Well, this is good for our random ramblings segment, because now it is time to go in on this, and the subject that I want to bring up on what we're about to just go off on tangents about is, why are so many people still pretending in this Democratic race? Why is Andrew Yang still in this race? Why is Tulsi Gabbard in this race? Why are all of these 5% less or less people in this race? You are not going to win the nominee. You're never going to be the Democratic nominee.
My belief is that they're there because the Democratic Party wants them to be there. They want them there to draw from Bernie.
And it's not working.
And it's not working.
That's what the Republicans tried to do in 2016. They tried to, they didn't try to. They just had this expanded field. And what ended up happening, Donald Trump did not just like blow away the competition when it came to these the Republican nomination. What ended up happening was that the support from typical standard Republicans was so spread thin that it ended up opening up a lane for Trump to be like, well, shit, all I need is 20% of the vote, and now I'm the nominee.
You'll win. You had Ted and everybody has to say.
At this point, did you know Ben Carson was actually the front runner?
Yeah, that's
pretty crazy.
You had, what was the Godfather's piece of guy? Like it. You had so many people,
don't call
and it's
me
just
on the Godfather stuff on recorded media.
It's like you spread them all out, and it's like, okay, well, we can take from here and here and here, and then maybe our guy get through, which is Joe. But like,
Joe's
it's not working.
Getting through. And see, the thing about it is, people keep saying, yeah, but in the national polls, this is a primary. We're going state by state. We're not going national. Everybody in the country is not going to vote on the same day for the Democratic
nominee.
nominee.
Based upon the primaries, the national is going to change.
It's going exactly.
Hillary was swamping Obama in the national polls.
There were polls that had her at like 55%, which is an indicator that
it's over.
That a blowout is coming.
Right, and he wins Iowa, and he comes up that short in New Hampshire. Yep. And then next thing you know, Hillary's looking like, what went wrong? What are we doing here? And she's Secretary of State instead of the president.
Right.
So
And maybe that's the angle for some of these people. Maybe they're thinking like, okay, well, maybe if Bernie or Warren or Joe Biden get in the race, I can get a spot in their administration. But the problem with that is that right now, and the overarching point of these debates and this race and what's going on really in American and world current times right now, is that we have to get rid of Donald Trump. Like, that's an absolute, it is imperative that we get him out of office. Like, we just have to. And right now, what these people like Tulsi Gabbard, who's going to get on stage this month, and she's going to try to kneecap Warren because, I don't know why at this point, but then you're going to have people like Andrew Yang trying to come at Bernie to try. You're going to have all these candidates who have absolutely no hope of winning this nomination taken away from three people that really we should all be focused on, because right now they're the only three people that even have other people are polling so bad that they can't even get a lot of these general general presidential election polls head to head because they're not polling high enough.
Right,
they're not enough name recognition
everywhere and focusing on Iowa, and it's like,
yeah, she closes down New Hampshire, and you're still in the race. And if I'm Kamala Harris, especially, out of all the people who are running that's not going to win, you probably have the best shot to be able to run again and try to win it.
Right.
with a corrected, more progressive actual record, you could say, okay, I made mistakes, and this is me improving upon those mistakes, acknowledging my mistakes, and now I have a much more progressive record as a senator, as a leader of the Democratic Party. You could do that if you're Kamala Harris. Plus, she has, identity politics on her side. Like, let's be honest. And all these other people, Amy Klobuchar, you're never going to be president. It's not happening. People are not excited about you. Nobody wants to hear someone talk about Medicare for all and the Green New Deal and all this. And then someone comes around and says, yeah, but don't you kind of just want to stick to the middle of the road? No, I just got inspired by this person and now you're about to come here and tell me what I can't have. I don't want that as president. Nobody does. That's why you're polling terrible. She needs to drop out. I don't care what Bill Maher says about how, I'm looking at a middle of the road Democrat like Amy Klobuchar. Yeah, well, nobody else is because she's polling at 5% and no one's interested in Amy Klobuchar. And I'm pretty sure that 90% of people who don't pay attention to politics is wondering, why is someone named Amy Klobuchar even on the stage?
They don't even know who she is.
They don't. It's ridiculous. Cory Booker is another person that could drop out and run again. You do not want to get to Iowa and get crushed. You do not want that to happen. If that happens, you damage your brand for a very long time.
Correct.
It's the same thing that happened with Beto. Beto's never going to be able to run again.
It's what would have happened to Joe if Obama hadn't picked him.
Joe Biden wouldn't even be in this position right now if Obama didn't pick him. And Obama didn't pick Joe Biden because Joe Biden was this staunch progressive that was going to stand with him in fights. He picked him to calm the nerves of older white voters so they would vote for a young black man. He knew better than to say, hey, let's team up Hillary, because America was not going to vote in a ticket of a black man and a woman. That wasn't happening, especially in 2008. And so Joe Biden owes his entire career to Barack Obama.
He does. Joe's run multiple times. He
had to drop out because of plagiarism, bro.
Yeah.
That. Come on, man. Why are you running, Joe? Go home.
You've got all of this money to hire writers, speech writers, campaign writers,
and
all
you
this.
Want to plagiarize?
Joe's a real special character.
He is a special character. I'll tell you though, as far as national polls go, he's one resilient dude. Yeah. Because he has been dragged through the mud by everybody. It seems like even mainstream media is taking the gloves off at this point. And every time you see Joe's Joe's still somehow in the lead.
It's surprising to everyone except, I don't know, maybe people love Barack that much.
I mean, he left with 59% approval rating, which is pretty insane.
I think the only one that was higher was FDR.
Yeah.
And
FDR was so popular they had to introduce term limits for president. That's what happens when you get that's what happens when you get a socialist as president. You got to create term limits to get them out of office.
I don't talk about socialism because that's the end of America right there. But everything that makes America what it is socialism. Your roads, your schools, your fire department, your police department, Social Security.
Social Security is a base example of what socialism is. All of these social safety net programs is.
Welfare, unemployment.
And it's something that should be expanded upon for us not to have it in so many other areas, or to even have, I wouldn't say income limits on it, because obviously you don't want millionaires and stuff like that benefit. But obviously people who are making less than the median income, you should pretty much be automatically put under these benefits.
You should. I'm looking for the candidate that speaks to what is left of the middle class and recreating the middle class. There is no middle class. You're either poor or you're rich. That's it. If you're making anywhere in between $50,000 to $100,000, you don't qualify for anything.
You get taxed for nothing. You get nothing. Hell taxed out of you.
Yeah, and you get nothing. You get taxed like you live in this luxurious life.
Exactly.
And you're trying to figure out how to make ends meet because you're getting taxed at 32% and a billionaire is getting taxed at 35%. How is that fair?
That's not fair.
And then you got so many loopholes for them that they don't even get to 35%. Once you go through all the loopholes, they're somewhere along the lines 19%.
They asked Elizabeth Warren after one of her rallies, well, what do you, because her thing is the middle class won't pay one extra penny on Medicare for all, not one penny. And so they said, well, what is middle class to you? And she's 100% anybody who's under $1 billion. What? So if I have $999 million, like technically I'm middle class and I don't have to pay a penny into this healthcare system that you're proposing?
Anything over $1 million, like that's reasonable. If you're making $1 million or more,
you should be contributing a lot more to society,
right?
Like, no. First of all, nobody needs $1 billion to be happy. Nobody. You're never even going to spend $1 billion. Like, it's not going to happen.
What did Dave Chappelle say? Yeah, I had $10 million and I'm eating at the same restaurant with these people that got $100 million when I turned down the money. But the only difference is $40 million.
Right.
The thing is, you know what I hate is that they say make America great again, but America was at its greatest. The rich were taxed at their highest.
Yeah, exactly.
Republicans still like to say that trickle down economics. You've been doing that for 40 years. It doesn't work.
It does not work. It's never going to work because it was just a foolish backstabbing of the American people, of the working class of this country.
Yeah, you get an initial surge, but longevity wise, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Just I hate it.
Yeah. But that's gonna do it for our first episode of the Black Post. This has been Jordan.
Matthias.
Thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, share with all your friends. Let everybody know that there's a movement. We need more Black, independent, progressive media, and we're happy to bring it to you.
Hit that bell. You get notifications.